never felt time like I do now. I never wanted it so much to stay. I never knew love before you, and now I'm trying to hold on in every way. So when I'm scared, you bring me courage. And this love is a terrifying thing. But when you call...
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the 9th service of Alayla Ministry, where our faith is rooted in God, our divine creator. I am minister, teacher, student, and servant Andrea Grace. Do you like our ministry today? So thank you for joining me. Today's service will be on part 2 on hearing the voice of God, as we continue discerning whether channeling is detestable by God or whether it's a natural soul gift of an awakening consciousness. But let's, as always, begin with prayer. We're going to repeat the prayer from last week. So bringing our 2 hands together in front of the heart, lifting the heart, bowing the head, surrendering the I know mind to the wisdom of the open heart, as we take a nice centering breath here. Heavenly Father, hear my prayer. I'm here in your presence, grateful. I bow my head and offer you my heart. Fill me with your spirit and transform me so that I am free from fear. Give me the gift of hearing so I can hear your holy voice and not be distracted or deceived by voices that take me away from you. Teach me your divine language so I can be a living example of grace. When you speak, help me hear clearly and take action without hesitation. Teach me to trust your way so I'm free of distractions and temptation. Let me be guided only by your spirit and wisdom. I praise you and thank you. Amen. All right, so we have a lot to respond to this week. So interestingly, because, God is so good, in a Facebook conversation, in a Facebook group, and I'm not in the group, this was actually shared with me by a friend of mine who happens to listen to my services. And anyway, so it's a conversation, it's a spiritual group, and it's a conversation, and a woman is making a comment to a gentleman. So she says to him, you can't be both a Christian and into the metaphysical. Truly you can't. They're the antithesis to each other. Metaphysical is very demonic. Drop the idea of hypnosis like someone handed you a burning lava rock. It opens portals, lies, demons, confusion, possibly losing your very soul. Okay, gosh. So gently I find this amusing because if you have even a cursory experience with the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, those books are filled with examples of the metaphysical. So meta just simply means beyond, or that which comes after. So all we're really talking about is that which is beyond, or that which comes after the physical, and that which is beyond our 5 physical senses, that which is even transcendent of time. So if we're looking at the Bible, any story, any prophet, or any kind of highlighted story or highlighted person that has any kind of vision or dream and receives a message by the direct word of God, that's a metaphysical phenomena. That's what that is. So so it seems that the metaphysical is inherent, is fundamental to Christian belief, actually. And then she talks about hypnosis, right? And so then she says that, okay, well, stay away from hypnosis, drop it like a hot lava stone. But we go in and out of hypnosis every day. So hypnosis is just simply a matter of brainwave states changing. And so right now I'm in beta consciousness as I've, got the service, there in my head. It's relatively planned. And, my mind is working to convey meaning, and your mind is working to pick up meaning, to be able to comprehend what it is that I'm saying and to apply it now to your direct experience and your worldview. That's beta. That's all beta. And then when the brainwaves start to slow down and we go into that relaxed state of consciousness, that's alpha. And we can find ourselves in alpha through, meditation, a yoga practice, or even just simply focusing very intently on something, on a project or a musical instrument, or even when we're highly focused on a moving practice of a sport or a dance or something like that. So that's alpha. And then the brain waves go into a slower state of grace, and that would be theta. And so it's in theta through which that we receive our inspired thoughts. And sometimes those inspired thoughts can be so fully formed in theta, but then it's actually, once we kind of come back into beta, it's quite difficult to kind of bring those concepts forward into beta. So the brainwave states are quite different, and they're not necessarily compatible. They're part of that cycle of consciousness of everyday waking life. And then the practice of hypnosis is being able to help the consciousness expand, to be able to then to reach that brainwave state that then enables the mind to open to greater wisdom and to bypass that critical mind which lives in beta. So that's all that is. And again, we're going in and out of it all day. So okay, buds on that. And then so let's now look at the Christ story. So the Old Testament is full of the metaphysical stories. Again, any time that somebody has a vision, a dream, or hears directly the word of God, that's metaphysical. And then the story of Jesus himself is saturated in the metaphysics. So remember how I had said that the word Christ, the etymology of Christ, comes from the word Christos, which is to do with being anointed. And so Christ isn't a name per se. It's actually a state of grace. It's an enlightened state of grace. And so remember how we came into a scene where Jesus, so he's resurrected, and he joins with the two men, the two brothers, as they're walking along the road, and then he joins them to share meat or to share bread with them. And so remember how he's revealing himself through his light body. And so that phenomena too is a metaphysical one. The whole Christ story is a metaphysical story. So to say that Christianity and metaphysics are the antithesis of one another is, to me, just willful ignorance. I don't know how any critical thinking mind can actually land there. I don't understand that. But what I do see from that post is that it's clearly based in fear. I mean, we can even see it in that she capitalized the word demon. It's for emphasis, Yeah, that's what fear looks like. So, that reminds us of how we're practicing our discernment. And the ways that we practice our discernment, just to review, is that we're asking ourselves, does this what I'm reading? Does this what I'm thinking? Does this what I'm hearing? Does this bring me closer to love or closer to fear? Does my heart open or does my heart close? Does this bring me closer to God or further away from God? Does this have me in the flow of the way, or does it have me distracted and confused and defending? right? So this is how we check in. This is how we cultivate and nurture our self-mastery. All right, so remember how last service we were talking about how, Moses, who was supposedly the one, and that's now not necessarily, there's not necessarily a consensus anymore through the religious scholars that Moses actually did author the 5 books, the original, the Pentateuch. But anyway, so let's say we're going to go with the original traditional accepted belief that Moses authored the initial warnings that everyone's quoting, right, that we looked at from Deuteronomy and Leviticus, which then is parroted by Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel as well, which we'll look at later. And so remember that that was in and of itself a metaphysical phenomena, because these warnings about mediumship and channeling and divination and wizardry and so on, apparently was being channeled from the Hebrew God Yahweh. Right, so you're with me, right? Yes. Okay, so remember that Moses is up there on Mount Sinai, channeling these 10, what was then called the 10 utterances, but now what we deem as the 10 commandments. And so one of those utterances is, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, right? But then we saw last service how in a few short moments that he comes down from the mountain, and then his response is to have killed the people who had doubt about Moses and the Hebrew God Yahweh, what the Hebrew God Yahweh was telling Moses. So they have doubt, they fashion a golden calf, they start idolizing that. And just to give you a historical context, so the people of the time believed that what we would now deem superstition, but the people of the time believed that a spirit could live in an idol. And so they had fashioned this golden calf so that a familiar god to them could embody that calf, and they can, connect with that. Okay, so Moses sees that, and then he orders the Levites to now to kill them. So there's the paradox, right? So Moses now does the very thing that the channeling told him not to do. So let's pause and feel that out. How does that land for you now as you sit here as a modern human being with your modern mores, with your current value system and the way that you want to live life and the way that you want to see life lived? How is that for you? How does that land for you? Does it have you falling at Moses's feet in awe of his actions, or does it have you recoiling deep within? He just writes on the tablet, chips away, thou shalt not kill, and then promptly turns around and then has 3,000 people killed. This isn't a redemption story. This is something else. And it has us feeling a certain kind of way. It lands in a certain kind of way. So what we've met is this primitive God concept, right? I just really want to bring this home, because all we're meeting is a God concept, and it's a primitive one. And our job now is to, check that against ourselves, to see how that lands for ourselves, because this is all about our self-knowledge. This is about how we're showing up in this world and what stories we're aligning to that feel good, true, and right for us. Because remember, that which is true is only ever always true. That which is true is only ever always true. And we've already found a discrepancy. We've already found an incongruency, a crack in the integrity. It's not good. It's not good. And so the gods that, like the God Yahweh, who smite and rampage and inflict their judgments through genocide, it turns out, through dispossession, through famine and plagues and floods and so on. So, you know, that God concept is not, it's not that of the power and the wisdom and the intelligence and the love that is accessible when we're still, when we stop, when we slow down. We can find it, it's here. That is the one that created this universe, the one who, the one whose in mind all of this exists, and in which we exist. So another one of the utterances was, "Thou shalt have no gods before me." So being a polytheistic world at the time, we can see how this is an attempt at monotheism. But what's interesting about it is that it doesn't say, there are no gods before me. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say there are no gods before me. I am the one, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. What it says is, thou shalt, it's an order, thou shalt have no other gods before me. It's like a parent who has a teenager who is trying to coerce the parent into letting them go to a party by saying, well, everybody else is going, everybody else's parents said it was okay. And the parent says, well, they're not your parents. I'm your father. I don't care what the other parents are saying. You shall have no other parent's authority before mine. I am your authority. It's a middling God. It's something else. It's another archetype. It's another entity. It's something else. I don't know how people haven't talked about this. Maybe they have. Maybe I'm late to the party, speaking of parties. And so, yeah, so the Israelites, they're dancing and reveling under the calf that they had made, under the idol that they had made. Their belief at the time was that that their God was infused in that calf, in that idol. And from our modern perspective, that scene, we would deem that superstitious, because we don't hold that belief. It seems to be more of a primitive belief system that a deity or a god or an entity, you know, it's like, it's the voodoo culture, right? And so our modern sensibilities would deem that superstitious. And so we can go back to that where I started with that woman's commentary. It lands as superstitious. And so let's look at the word superstitious just for fun. So it comes from the Latin superstitio, from super meaning above or over, and stare, maybe stare, which meaning to stand or remain. So it was used to imply standing over or standing in awe of something. So back in time, superstitio was more just being in awe. And then it was apparently Cicero, whose own story is a fascinating one if you ever wanted to look at that one. But so he was a lawyer from Julius Caesar's time and a bit of a savant. He contributed a lot to Latin. And so during the classical Latin period, he was the one who made a distinction between superstitio and another word, religio. And so religio came to mean the rational practice of religion, whereas superstitio was used for the irrational and excessive awe of gods specifically. And so now we use superstition, and we use it for anything. We use it for any irrational belief or fear, right? So, you know, the superstitions that I grew up with, which I lived a bit in my highly suggestible youth, you know, and maybe with a little bit of OCD tendencies, I'm not sure, but, you know, you wouldn't step on that crack for fear of breaking your mother's back. You wouldn't walk under that ladder for bad luck, or open the umbrella inside, or if you happen to step in front of, or if a black cat happened to walk in front of you, what was that? I don't know, I forget, 9 years of bad luck or something, right? So we still have those superstitions, and the superstitions of the time, we have remnants of them today. But the thing is, it's still symbolic. So again, we give it as much power as the meaning that we place on it. We give it as much power as the meaning that we're willing to put on it. So we can always pull that back. We can always deem it meaningless and then take away any of its power. But so the superstitions of the time were, for example, ancestral worship, which we can still see in a lot of the Asian traditions. Charms to ward off disease or bad spirits and things like that. And we can see that now today in the evil eye, or any kind of amulet, or a stone or something like that. At the time, they also had casting sticks or stones, and so they would use them to divine the future or to make a decision. And then they also had knotted cords, used similarly to the sticks and the stones, called Nephilim cords. And they were thrown down, and so each cord was assigned an element or a symbol for a deity or a spiritual concept, and so they would be thrown down, and depending on how they landed, somebody would read them, and then it would be used, how they landed would be used to answer questions or to find answers. And so in that way, you know, we can still find that in different tools that are used today, and essentially that's how we can use the oracle cards as well. But at the end of the day, again, we give it as much power as the meaning that we assign to it, and at the end of the day, it's simply symbolic. And for our part, our only job is to ask, does this bring me closer to God, or does it take me further away from God? That's our discernment. That's it. Okay, so let's see. So there was also superstitions around numbers, and we can see that some numbers were bad luck and some numbers were fortunate. And so we can see that today. In the first service that I did in my friend's apartment in Sydney, her building, because it was a Chinese developer, doesn't have a fourth floor. So actually, she lives on the fourth floor, but it's called the fifth floor. So what's actually the fourth floor is called the fifth floor. What's actually the fifth floor is called the sixth floor, and so on. So we've departed from reality, haven't we, there? So we can also throw in, okay, does this bring me closer to reality? Which is really our question, is this true? And we know what's true because it's only ever always true. And if it's not always true, then it's subjective truth and it's storytelling. And so storytelling is something else. It's not, that's not God. We can find an entry point through the stories, through imagination, but it's not the end point, because God is something else. It's an expansion. It's a peace. It's a surrender. It's a grace. It's the disappearing of borders and boundaries. It's an inherent okayness. But I don't want to fast track you. You know, these kinds of experiences come through deep practices of meditation, or they might just come suddenly in an unexpected way. But you know, individuals have these experiences. And as I was sharing with the publishing house of Hay House, you might find those stories through a publishing house like hers. Okay, so they also believed in these idols and something called teraphims, which again were these kind of like dolls or statues. And I was looking at the word idol and I thought, oh, I wonder if that's where we get the word doll from. That, you know, idol, the doll. I didn't look that up, but I thought that was interesting. And another weird, and thankfully we don't have it now, at least to my knowledge, tradition or superstition at the time was looking at the organs of a recently deceased animal and making readings out of that. And we'll find a reference of that actually in the text that we explore later. Okay, so as modern human beings, we can acknowledge these superstitions. We also can acknowledge that we ourselves in modern culture have superstitions, and you might want to pause this and take stock of the superstitions that you might be holding, these beliefs that, you know, are worth questioning to check out what's truly true. Or not, or just keep them if they feel good. And if these superstitions are like a tool or like a training wheel to help you bridge that connection, to help create that connection with the divine, with your own divinity, with that indwelling God spark within, you know, keep it. But if it brings stress, why keep it? So anyway, so the pedantic nature of the time in the historical context, it's all we're really looking at is that, so the white arts are white if they're practiced by the accepted people of the time, the prophets, the visionaries, the magis, the priests. And then if these same practices are practiced by people who are unacceptable or unpopular, or are of a nation for whose land you wish to dispossess, and so you need to cast them in a certain kind of way, then it suddenly becomes black arts. So black art, both religious and secular, was called white art when it was practiced by the priests and the prophets and the magis, the accepted ones. So there's a section in King. So right now, I'm looking down here because it's the Daily Bible. So right now I'm going through a chronological, let's see, it's called the Daily Bible in chronological order. And so I'm in June and I'm reading this story about the first king of northern Israel, and his name was Jeroboam. And it doesn't end well for him. You know, they're painting the picture of he's not a great guy because he's leaving God, and we're still with the God Yahweh. But anyway, he's going around and he's just making priests of anyone that he wants to. And so I'm bringing that up just to say that it's just an illustration that was happening at the time. It just validates the lack of trustworthiness of the point of view, that it's just all perspective. The point of view of the Hebrew God Yahweh in the story of, well, we find it in Deuteronomy, don't we, where he's being coached to dispossess those 7 nations. So what I'm getting at is that just because the Canaanites and the other nations were called these things, it doesn't mean that they were those things. And even if they were, it doesn't mean that it was evil or demonic, right? Because what we find, you know, people are people. What we find is that we have the indwelling spirit within us. And this was the teaching that Jesus was bringing to us. All right, so let's see, I might just talk a little bit more and then we will go into a break. Earlier I had said that the warnings of Leviticus and Deuteronomy were echoed later by Isaiah and Jeremiah and then Ezekiel. When we look into their stories, what we find is that all of them were psychic mediums too. who all had visions. Isaiah has a vision where he sees God. Jeremiah has a symbolic omen-like vision. And let's see, Ezekiel has a vision of seeing beings in the clouds. And so they have an interpretation of those visions. So we haven't left the metaphysical. We're still deeply in the conversation of the metaphysical, even though, their commentary about, being a channel, being a spiritist, being a medium, being a necromancer, which is talking to the dead, that they're still they're repeating these earlier warnings that Moses supposedly had authored, right? Let's look at Isaiah just quickly. So this passage is about afflictions to idolaters. And he says, and when they shall say unto you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek unto their God, and for the living to the dead? And so what we can see in here is that it's still their God. We're still in a polytheistic mind space. And so if it's polytheistic, that means the Hebrew God that they're working with is one of many and is not the infinite, ultimate, great creator, the creator of universes. It's something else. Okay, that's Isaiah. All right, and that's helpful, right? So we can accept that, check, yes. So why should we go through others when we can go directly through God, when we can have that direct relationship with God? Absolutely, totally agree, check. Okay, let's look at Jeremiah. Okay, so he says, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, let not your prophets and your diviners that be in the midst of you deceive you, neither hearken to your dreams which ye cause to be dreamed, for they prophesy falsely unto you in my name. I have not sent them, saith the Lord. Okay, so they might be charlatans. Okay, check. That's an opportunity for us to use our discernment. There are charlatans in every industry, and of course they're going to be in the spiritual domain as well, amongst the spiritual seekers. Okay, great. Use your discernment. Be mindful of charlatans. Great, check. We agree. Okay, let's look at Ezekiel. Okay, so Ezekiel's painting a picture here. Just kind of let this picture come into your mind. So the king of Babylon stood at the parting of the way, at the head of the two ways, to use divination. He shook the arrows to and fro. He consulted the teraphim, which is the little statues. He looked in the liver, which is now in reference to looking at the organs of a recently dead animal for insights into something, to be able to read it. I don't know. In his right hand was the divination for Jerusalem, to set battering rams, to open the mouth in the slaughter. Oh dear. To lift up the voice with shouting, to set battering rams against the gates, to cast up mounts, to build forts. Okay. All right, fine. We agree. We are not going to be looking at the organs of the freshly killed animal, deceased animal, for getting a sense of what we should do tomorrow, or who should be our friend. Okay, we get that. We agree. So I think it's time now to pass the basket. So let's go ahead and do that. So thank you for supporting the good work that we do here. I'm grateful for everybody who contributed to last week's sermon. Thank you so much. It means a lot. Yes, I'm grateful. Don't want to drag it out. I'm mindful of the time because I have a lot to share. All right, so contributions can be made by check, made out to Alila Ministry and sent to 430 Springfield Avenue, Suite 209 in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, 07922. Or you can use Zelle or a PayPal. So for Zelle, you can use the number and the account name there, and for PayPal you can use that code, or you can use the link. All right, so let's just take a little break. You can enjoy the music, and I'll see you in a bit.
If you need someone to hold your hand, when you're lonely, I'll be there. I will give you everything I am. it's your smile when we're dancing that brings me back to who I am. When I'm old, when I'm faded, these memories will bring me back, oh, bring me back. So when I'm scared, you bring me courage. And this love is a terrifying feeling.
Okay, so welcome back. How are we doing today? I hope you're enjoying your Sunday. All right, so do you like my environment? Do you like my church? Like my ministry? Earlier this morning, we had this beautiful deer buck come through. So amazing, so stunning, so majestic. Deer medicine, according to the symbolic teachings of the indigenous Americans, that the deer is symbolic for gentleness. And so if a deer crosses your path, the message is about gentleness. So take that or leave that. Does that bring you closer to God or further away from God? Does it take you into love or into fear? If it feels good, keep it. If it doesn't, question it. Okay, so here we are. So, okay, so before I bring the good news, I think I want to summarize what we were discussing before. If we take the literalist point of view of these scriptures, of these texts, because they were from a culture at that time, were for a particular audience, the people who wrote those didn't necessarily have the vision to include our now level of consciousness and our code of ethics and our mores, our morality. So again, as I had said in our last service, they're not necessarily for us, but it is a living work in as much as it lives in us and in our interpretation. And so that's why we're checking in to say, okay, does this resonate with me? Does this bring me closer to love or further away from love? How does this land for me? This is our practice. So I guess the concern, if I had one that I wanted to express, if I had one, is that if we're taking a literalist point of view of these texts, we are in danger of sinking into a very deep spiritual rut. And especially if we're passing on these stories as if they were truly true, when we already know that they're not truly true. And so we can take stock of the last several hundred years and we can ask, has literalist religion overall, has the church helped bring me closer to God? Has it nurtured my personal relationship with him? Has it inspired and enlightened that God spark? Has it amplified that God spark within me? Or has it served to confuse and distract me and keep me stuck, the same and small? Because it seems to me that the church has actually come between, has been an instrument of division, actually, and distracts us with the dramatic stories of the Old Testament of that nationalistic God who favors others and dispossesses and murders and all of that kind of stuff. So when we started to hear about the pandemic back in early 2020, I knew all of my spidey senses went off and I knew this was not good. And so in my stillness and in my quietness, through prayer, in meditation, I asked, where do you want me? God, where do you want me in this? Because I already had recognized deception. Something was not right. There was a story being told. We were being spellcasted. And somehow I recognized it right away. I asked, where do you want me? And the message that I heard was, Jesus was our best advocate. He called out the tyranny. He called out the corruption. He called out the hypocrisy. What I got from that was, okay, I needed to start taking action. And so in response, I reached out to some people. It was very quick. We created a very tight community very quickly. We organized the first ever university rally against the mandates. That was already in May of 2020. And so, and actually that now brings me up, as I'm hearing myself tell that story, that brings up another argument that the literalist Christians will have and say, well, what also is like New Age metaphysics, metaphysical mumbo jumbo, and the devil is because you've used the word they, or you've used the word we. So in that case, as I'm retelling the story, I heard myself say, well, Jesus was our greatest advocate. And so there's it's our, right? Jesus was our greatest advocate. And so again, the literalist Christians will say, well, that's not the one true God. But the one true God is still, it's monotheistic, and it includes the Holy Spirit, it includes Christ, it includes the angels who are of service. That's still all God. That's we. Okay, that's enough. And so remember how a couple of services ago I introduced you to the Upanishads? And so the Upanishads can be translated into meaning sitting with God, or sitting next to God, or sitting close to God. And they're essentially a conversation. In the Upanishads, God is revealed as truth consciousness, bliss, as the unchanging, as the permanent, as the highest reality, as that which is always true. And the Upanishads also reveal that we are all incarnations of God. And so what's interesting is that that's the message that Jesus came to bring. He came to show us what's possible for the individual. He came to remind us of what we are, and to be an example so that we wouldn't be confused. So he brings that gospel, right? And that gospel, so the etymology of gospel, the got part is good. So the go from Old English good, spell from Old English, which means to tell or talk or story, news or a message. It's the same spell as used in the word spell, to cast a spell, or the verb to spell. And then it was changed to God's story and used from the 13th century for doctrines of importance, and then later sermons. So gospel means God's story, the good word, right? The good message. And so the pretend good news is that you're a sinner, and Jesus, there's only one Son of God, and that was Jesus, and he died for your sins, and that's the end of it. And so you're powerless. But actually, that's not the truth of it. And in Hebrews 8, in one fell swoop, we just wipe out everything that we have just been spending the last sermon and today's sermon on. Okay, let's look at it. Hebrews 8. Now, however, Jesus has received a much more excellent ministry. Just as the covenant he mediates is better and is founded on better promises. For if that first covenant had been without fault, no place would have been sought for a second. But God found fault with the people and said, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they did not abide by my covenant, and I disregarded them, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, declares the Lord, I will put my laws in their minds and inscribe them on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will each one teach his neighbor or his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. By speaking of a new covenant, he has made the first one obsolete, and what is obsolete and aging will soon disappear. So in a single stroke, we have just wiped out the Old Testament. And he's teaching us a lot here, actually. So, okay, it wasn't perfect. Jesus has received a much more excellent ministry. If that first covenant had been without fault, then it wouldn't need a second. But we do need a second because it was. All right, so now we have the new covenant. And he says, I'll put my laws in their minds and inscribe them on their hearts. So this God is talking about that indwelling spirit placed in our hearts, and that their relationship will be a personal one. So we're moving now away from this top-down structure to now having that personal, private relationship with God. I will put my laws in their minds and inscribe them on their hearts, that the individual receives these mores, these values. And then he says, and they will all know me, for I will forgive their iniquities and I will remember their sins no more. The indwelling spirit is within. And it's very clear that the first one has now become obsolete. So let's find out who Jesus is, because he actually tells us who he is. Let's start here. He tells us, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays his life down for the sheep. And the hired worker, and not being a shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, beholds the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters the sheep. And the hired worker flees because he's a hired worker and he's not caring for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known by mine, according as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And my life I lay down for the sheep, and other sheep I have that are not of this fold. These also it is necessary for me to bring, and my voice they will hear. And there will become one flock, one shepherd. Because of this the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that again I may take it. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. Authority I have to lay it down, and authority I have again to take it. This command I received from my Father. Therefore again, there came a division among the Jews because of these words, and many of them said, he has a demon and is mad. Why do you hear him? And others said, these sayings are not those of a demoniac. Is a demon able to open blind men's eyes? And we've talked about the symbolism of being blind to the truth, being blind to spiritual divine revelation. Let's keep going. All right, so then the dedication in Jerusalem came, and it was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the porch of Solomon. The Jews therefore came around him and said to him, until when do you hold our soul in suspense? If you are the Christ, the Christos, right, the anointed one, tell us freely. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in the name of my Father, these testify concerning me, but you do not believe, for you are not of my sheep. According as I said to you, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, and I give continuous life to them, and they will not perish throughout the age, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch out of the hand of my Father. I and the Father are one. Therefore again the Jews took up stones, and they may stone him. Jesus answered them, I showed you many good works from my Father. Because of which work of them do you stone me? The Jews answered him, saying, We do not stone you for a good work, but for slander, and because you, being a man, make yourself God. Jesus answered them, Is it not having been written in your law? I said, You are gods. If he called them gods to whom the word of God came, and the writing is not able to be broken, of him whom the Father sanctified and sent into the world, do you say, you slander, because I said, I am the Son of God? If I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. And if I do, even if you may not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and may believe that the Father is in me and I in him. And so what he's doing there is he's giving their gospel, their canons back to them. Because what he's referring to is Psalm 82, where God says, I have said, you are gods and sons of the Most High, all of you, but you die as man and you fall as one of the heads. And so what he's saying to them is that, but you've been told that you're gods too. What he's trying to convey is that this is not unique to him. He's showing and teaching us and them who he's speaking to wake up to the divine within ourselves. That's what the good news is. That's what the gospel is. And this is the truth to contemplate. What is this? What am I? And we can say, well, if it's true for me, then it must be true for you too. And so therefore, that's how we have the golden rule. And so oftentimes when we have these enlightened experiences, again, through a deep meditation practice, through an intensive retreat, or, and again, it can just happen as you're walking down the street. There are many stories where suddenly the perception expands and everything suddenly makes sense, and there's a deep okayness and a deep peace. And that when we look into the eyes of another, it's our own eyes that we see. We meet ourselves. And actually, that's making me think of the salutation in Nepal and in Tibet, which is namaste. And that's said to translate essentially to mean that the Buddha in me, the Buddha consciousness in me, sees and acknowledges the Buddha consciousness in you, the God light in you. And so the world religions reflect one another. This is why, again, through our services, we're steering well away from dogma. But that's why I think that it's important to have this conversation and to bring it into our everyday consciousness. Again, I don't think there are other services like these ones. And they're divinely inspired. This is not me. The thought came in, it hit me. I received the message that I needed to have a service. I needed to do an Easter service, but it couldn't be the first service. It had to be, we had to do a welcome service first. Okay, so we're almost finished. So let's look at Jesus's prayer in John. So Jesus prays for all believers. I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be one in us, and that the world may believe that you sent me, and the glory which you gave me I have given them, that they may be one just as we are one, I in them and you in me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. Father, I desire that you also, whom you gave me, may be with me where I am, and that they may behold my glory, which you have given me. For you loved me before the foundation of the world, O righteous Father. The world has not known you, but I have known you, and these have known that you sent me. And I have declared to them your name, and I will declare it, that the love with which you loved me may be in them, and I in them. All right, so let's finish up here. It's starting to rain. Yeah, we get a nice cleansing. All right, so my invitation is to be still, to know God. We'll do a part 3. And I just want to ask you to check the Alila Center calendar for the upcoming events, for in-person events, and also online events. And I would love to see you and meet you. And again, if you need one-on-one help, I'm happy to be of service. All right, so thank you for joining. You are God. God is you. You have the indwelling spirit within you. And my invitation is to just practice before our next service, to be still, to take some time out of the busyness of your day and be still. It's in the stillness that we know him. All right. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you
If you
soon.
need someone to hold your hand when you're lonely, I'll be there. I will give you everything that I am. That I am.